Hey there, everybody. I'm joined by Steve, and we are here to learn how to play Star Trek CCG, the very basics. So we're going to try to do this in about 20 minutes or less. So hopefully this is a crash course and sort of the basics. And we'll preface this by saying this is a very complex game. These are the very basic rules and basic flow. There's lots of asterisks and exceptions that we're not going to cover in this video. So Steve, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Thanks for having me back on the channel, Matt. Yeah, as Matt said, this is going to be a how to play basic Star Trek CCG. And this seemed like a really timely video to make because I understand with the new season of Star Trek Picard being really popular, this game is selling a lot more than it has in recent years. The singles and sealed product is selling on the secondary market pretty quickly right now. So hopefully some people find this interesting and figure out how to play, either dig out your own cards, your old cards, or buy some new stuff. Two things like Matt said. First, this is a Star Trek CCG first edition, how to play. We won't cover the second edition of the game, which plays very differently. And second, this is the bare basics of how to play the game. This game was out for a number of years, and like other Decipher games, particularly Star Wars CCG, the Star Trek CCG over the course of the years introduced many new card types and concepts to allow them to explore a lot of different terrain. And that's just beyond the scope of a basic how to play. So we're going to go through things kind of sort of like, I'd say sort of how the game existed back during the first few sets, the very basics, and then maybe we'll have an advanced play video later on. So to begin with, I should say the basic goal of Star Trek CCG is for you to score 100 points before your opponent scores 100 points. The main way that you score points in this game is by accomplishing missions. And there are other ways to score points as well, but the bulk of your points in any given game is almost always made up of points scored by accomplishing missions. In a few minutes, I'm going to go through and show the different card types and how they look, including missions. I just wanted to state that up first, the goal is to score points. An interesting feature of this game is it has two phases, a seed phase and a play phase. And the seed phase is really just an elaborate game setup. Many of you who play board games, like modern strategy board games, there's usually some kind of a table setup phase. Well, most CCGs don't really have that. Usually you just sort of shuffle a deck and draw your hand and you're playing. But Star Trek is more like a board game in that respect, in that you're laying out, what you're really doing is you're laying out the space line, which are all the planets and space missions that you're going to go to during the course of the game. And other cards are located at those missions. It's not just laying things out, though, following a certain set of rules. In fact, you are interacting with your opponent and you are sort of setting traps for them. These trap cards are called dilemmas, which we'll get into in a little bit. So it is a setup phase, but it's also, there is a strategic element to it as well. So the seed phase is broken down by 4 steps: doorways, missions, dilemmas, and facilities. And I'll go through those with showing some visual examples in a little bit. After the seed phase, you'll go to the play phase, which takes up the majority of your game time. And every turn you do basically 3 things: play cards, execute orders, and draw cards. Every turn, under the basic rules, every turn you can only play 1 card. And what's unique about this game is that the cards have no cost to them. So it's not like Jean-Luc Picard costs 7 energy and Wesley Crusher costs 1 energy or something like that. No, all cards, it has no cost. You just play the card.
So there's no like resource management aspect to this?
Well, yes and no. No. The basic rules, no. It's just you play a card, you decide which card you want to play. Interrupts and doorways play for free, which don't require you to do any of your cards. But later on in the game, they added a large number of different types of cards that allowed other cards to play for free, meaning they don't count as your 1 card. And this is sort of beyond the scope of the basic how to play. But when you get into more advanced levels of play, the resource management element is optimizing the number of free card plays you get beyond your 1 card per turn. But that's probably best for another video. But under the basic rules, yeah, you just play 1 card, they have no cost. Executing orders is the bulk of your turn, and that's where you do basically everything you think you could do in an episode of Star Trek. You're going to load your personnel, that's the characters, personnel onto starships. You're going to move them around to different planets. You're going to beam them down. You're going to attempt missions and counter these obstacle cards called dilemmas. Maybe you'll score points by completing a mission. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll engage in battle with your opponent's starships or away teams. All this happens in the execute orders phase, and you continue to do actions. On your turn, it would be just you doing actions until you either run out of things you want to do, or your personnel or crew, your away team or your crew gets stopped. And we'll talk about what that means later on. And lastly, to end your turn, you'll draw a card. So unlike in some other CCGs like Magic, you don't draw a card at the beginning of your turn, you draw a card to end your turn. And it is, under the basic rules, you just draw one card every turn at the end of your turn. Of course, there are many other cards that let you draw additional cards. And again, that's sort of one of the, actually how the game is played. The strategy of the game is optimizing the number of free card draws you get. Let's switch over and take a look at how these cards look. So the main way to play this game is through a program called Lackey. It's an old, many of you on this channel probably used it before. It's an old freeware program. I think it was first built in like the late 90s, early 2000s. You can load a number of different plugins into it, and the Star Trek CCG plugin is actively maintained by the Continuing Committee. It's got every card that Decipher produced and every virtual card the Players Committee produced. So let's take a look at some card types here. We'll start with missions. And I won't have time to go through exactly how Lackey works, but it's a little wonky, but people can figure it out by looking at some tutorials online, or it's just gonna mess with it and you'll figure it out. The plugin includes these little tabs here for each of the different types of decks or areas your cards can be in. I won't get into all that right now, but let's look at some missions. So let's look at this mission. Study hole in space. Okay, so this is a mission, and it's, when you hear the term mission, you might think it's like a verb card, like an interrupt or event in, or an effect or something like that in other games. But actually, a mission is a noun. It's a place. It's both a place to go and a thing to do. So this mission, Study hole in space, is a space mission. You know that because it's got a little in the middle where it says Morgana Quadrant, to the left of it has a little star field icon. That means it's a mission in space. You have two types of missions: space missions and planet missions. Those are important because space missions will be attempted by your starship and its entire crew who are on board the starship. Planet missions will be attempted just by a selected number of personnel in an away team who you'll beam down to the planet. And that has some different consequences because your ship, if you're doing a space mission, your whole ship that's attempting it is vulnerable to whatever is out there at that mission. On a planet mission, only the selected personnel who you beam down and who you choose to send down are vulnerable. In practice, this makes space missions a whole lot more deadly than planet missions. So a lot of players will either gravitate towards planet missions or try to put off doing the space missions until later in the game. So yeah, you've got it's a space mission. As its name, the name of the mission is Study hole in space. The location of it is Morgana Quadrant. That's mostly just flavor text from the episode it comes from, but in some circumstances it can have game utility, and then a little bit of flavor text: investigate mysterious void. The next line below it is the requirements to accomplish it. And these requirements are usually skills or attributes on personnel. So these are skills and attributes that must be on the personnel in the starship attempting it. In this case, it's leadership and diplomacy, which are skills, and integrity greater than 40. Integrity is one of the, when we get to personnel, you'll see that in a few minutes that they have three attributes: integrity, cunning, and strength. So integrity greater than 40 means you should total the integrity of all the personnel on your ship who are still alive and active and participating in this mission. If it's over 40, that'll be sufficient to accomplish. Matt, feel free to jump in if anything's unclear or any questions on this.
No, you're doing a great job, Steve. Keep at it.
Thanks. All right. Next line down, you can see, for those of you who know Star Trek really well, you see a United Federation of Planets logo and a Klingon Empire logo. That means that the two affiliations who can attempt this mission are Federation and Klingons. So not every affiliation in this game can attempt all missions. So you're going to be selecting ones that are attemptable by your affiliation. And this, what I loaded into Lackey here is a little quick Federation starter deck I put together. Um, uh, all right, and then you have a point box on the right, which is 35 points. So should you accomplish this mission, you'll get 35 points towards your goal of 100 points. Point values of missions range anywhere from like a low of like maybe 20 is probably the lowest I've ever seen. Maybe one that's like 15, but generally 20 on up to, I think there's one that's like a 55 or 60 point mission. As you may guess, the requirements to accomplish missions scale with the number of points they're worth. So in my view, missions in the 35 point range are kind of a sweet spot, because then if you can win the game by accomplishing 3 missions in that point range, and then maybe tacking on a couple bonus points. So we'll talk about bonus points later, but get some bonus points here or there in the game to get you to 100 for a solid like 3 mission win. The missions that are worth more points can be very difficult to accomplish. And also under the current rules of the game, we won't get into this too much, but the current tournament format makes them riskier, the higher point value missions, because this game allows your opponent to also attempt your missions. So if you're looking at this mission, on the other half of it, you see that it's kind of like it's templated in 2 directions. There's a big side and a small side. The small side has the same affiliation, has a blue and a red to sort of abbreviate Federation and Klingon, has the same requirements, leadership, diplomacy, and integrity, greater than 40, and the point box. What this means is that your opponent can also attempt this mission using the same, basically the same requirements. So that means that there is a bit of a race to accomplish some of these. Now, maybe in another video we can talk about the strategy of whether you should or should not try to steal your opponent's missions. That's a tricky part of this game. Under the current tournament rules, if you're playing in a continuing committee tournament, you can only steal missions that are worth 40 or more points, or if you attempted to also seed that mission. That's a little confusing for now, but I'll just say that means that most people are gravitate toward missions worth less than 40 because they're typically not stealable. All right, final thing on the bottom is number 4 is the span. This basically means how distant the mission is, and it will use up your ship's range to get there, which we can get to when we get to ships. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these missions. I'll just point out that we also have planet missions, and they have a little planet icon. If you look under the word evaluate terraforming to the bottom of that, on the left, you'll see the planet icons as a planet mission. All right. I'm going to move on from missions and talk about personnel really quickly, because personnel are the people that are going to be accomplishing your missions. So let's look at Jean-Luc Picard. So here's a personnel. Top left, you've got his affiliation icon, Federation, as you might expect, his name. On the right, it says Star Trek The Next Generation, which originally had no gameplay purpose, just a logo to tell you which show it was from. Later on, it has some gameplay purpose, but not worth talking about now. Big flavor text box. These are really fun to read in this game. A lot of cool information in there. A lot of inside jokes, too. Above it, you see his officer. That's his classification. I think there are 7 classifications in this game. Maybe 8, if I'm counting correctly. Classifications and skills are more or less the same thing in this game. There are a couple of differences, but not worth getting into right now. But just think they're basically a kind of skill. Below the flavor text, you have all of his skills. Diplomacy ×2, archaeology, leadership, navigation, honor, music. Like how honor is a skill in this game. It's kind of funny. He's got his 3 attributes: integrity, cunning, and strength. Integrity of 9 is very high, so he's very trustworthy. Cunning of 8 is definitely above average, pretty high. Strength of 6 is more on the average side. And then the last thing to note is he has this little gold star. That's a command star. So you need these little stars to staff your ships, which we'll show in a second when we get to ships. And so, yeah, personnel have a variety of different skills. Here's Data. He's got engineering and astrophysics. Jordan LaForge, he's got double engineering, both his classification and his skill. Beverly Crusher, she's a doctor, so she's got actually double medical, both for classification and her first skill. That's how personnel look. Ships, let's look at them really quickly. Here is a starship, the USS Nebula. Oh, here's something I should point out. Most of the cards I've shown you so far, I think all of the ones I've shown you so far have been unique cards. So unique cards don't have a dot or anything in front of their name. They just have their name. In this game, universal, meaning non-unique, universal ships and characters have this little cut-up diamond in front of their title. So the USS Nebula is universal. You can have as many of them as you want on the table. This represents like your generic Nebula class starship. So yeah, its name is USS Nebula. Its class is Nebula class, as opposed to the Enterprise, which its name is Enterprise. Its class is Galaxy class. Yeah, universal USS Nebula. At the bottom are its attributes, which are different than personnel. Ships have a range, weapons, and shields. In many ways, range is the most important attribute in this game. It tells you how fast they can go. Essentially, every mission you try to go past, when we set this game up, you'll see, but every mission you go past, it's going to use up the mission span worth of range. So this mission had a span of 4. So the Nebula's 8 range would be halfway used up by flying past it. A couple of things. If you look right above the word range, you'll see a gold command star and a silver staffing star. So to make this ship operational, make it move and battle and things like that, you'll need to have 1 personnel who has a command star and 1 personnel who has at least a staffing icon, a staffing star. A little bit confusing, but command stars are better than staffing, so they can count as staffing also. Most everybody here in my deck seems to have a command star, but like Alyssa Ogawa, Nurse Ogawa, she only has a staffing star. So she can fill a staffing star, but she can't satisfy a command star, but Picard could be either a command or a staffing. All right, let's move over and look at dilemmas now, because dilemmas are a really important part of this game. When you are setting up the space line, you are going to seed dilemmas under missions. And dilemma looks like this. Weirdly, this is one of the weird quirks of the first edition of Star Trek CCG, but verb cards have their card type at the top. Noun cards have their name at the top. So all dilemmas just say dilemma on the top line, but the name of it is in the box under the picture. So it's security precautions. Whereas like you saw, Alyssa Ogawa, her name's at the top. I don't know why the design was like this, but anyway. So this is security precautions.
We're just approaching the 20-minute mark. I know we said we do it under 20. I don't want to rush you. I'm wondering if we can do our advanced video.
Yeah, I think let me just do this then. Let's just go through this real quickly and I'll just show that these are what dilemmas look like. They have a name and then they have some requirements to get past them. And when you encounter them, you'll read them. So then let's just fast forward then. I will say that, there's events and interrupts, which are kind of like single use or verb cards that stay on the table during the game. And that's probably enough for us to get started then. So what I think I will do is just very quickly run through how you set up this game during the seed phase and like 1 or 2 turns single player. And then I think Matt and I might try to play a 2-player, like a real game of this in a subsequent video. Okay, yep. So how we would do this is we're going to skip the doorway phase for this game because that's beyond the scope of a starter deck game. And we're just going to go straight to missions. So how this would work is here you have your 6 missions. You shuffle your missions. Reveal to owner. Okay, shuffle your missions, and then you and your opponent take turns laying them out to form the space line. So it's just me showing the setup of this game. You won't see your opponent's missions here, but they would be kind of either mixed in between yours or somewhere grouped along the space line, depending on how you guys decide to lay out your missions. You have that option. So you just sort of lay them out, shuffled up, so it's random which way they come out. You can decide whether you want to put them on the left or the right, and you lay them out like that. You've got 6 here, but normally there would be 12, yours and your opponent's, either all grouped together or somehow interspersed. There's a few other rules about how they should be laid out, but that's enough for this. And then you shift to dilemma phase, and you and your opponent are going to be seeding dilemmas under the mission. Dilemma types need to match the type of the mission. So this one here is a security precautions planet dilemma. Now, normally these would be face down so your opponent can't see them, but I'm just going to put them and they'd be under your opponent's missions. But yeah, so you would match type to type. So let's pretend these are your opponent's missions then. You could put this security precautions dilemma under this planet mission. It's a planet dilemma. And then you could put something like this, aphasia device, which is space dilemma, under your opponent's space mission. Again, pretend this is your opponent's mission, not your own. I can even rotate it so it looks like it's your opponent's. Okay. All right, and then finally you have a kind of dilemma that is split space/planet. This can go into either mission. So there's lack of preparation. We'll put this under a planet mission, but it could go to a space one just as easily. Okay. Excuse me. Well, normally you put all your dilemmas out, but we'll accelerate through this a little bit. And you just slide these under when you finish seating them all, so that the dilemmas are kind of like tucked under here. Most players put like 3 or 4 dilemmas under each of their opponent's mission. With your dilemmas seated, the final step of the seed phase is the facility phase. And what a facility is, it's kind of your home base during the game. The original type of facility was the outpost. They added a few different kinds later on, but for this, we'll just show you an outpost. This Federation outpost, you're going to build it on any mission that you want. You're probably going to put it on one of your own missions, so we'll put it here. And when we get into the play phase, this is where personnel, ships, equipment, other types of cards will come into play. For more advanced videos, a lot of other types of cards can be seeded during the seed phase, and they usually get seeded during the final step, the facility phase right now. But we'll save that for a later video. And I think it would be fun just to play a couple of quick turns just to get you guys familiar with the turn order of a turn. So let me just go ahead and do that. So let's just, your seed phase is over, you move to the play phase, and you shuffle up your deck. So this is in Lackey, this is your deck. It's now hidden and it is shuffled. Move the hand tab. You have 7 cards to begin the game. So draw 7 cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as we showed you a few minutes ago, on your turn, the first thing you do is you play a card. So I'm going to begin by playing Deanna Troi, and I'll play her. She's a personnel. I'm going to play her to my outpost, and you can actually, you can put her behind the outpost, whatever you want. I think in the game, your opponent does not need to know what is on your ships or outposts, usually, so you can kind of hide her or however you want to do it. In Lack, you can like slip her to a different tab. Anyway, so Deanna Troi has been played to this outpost, and in the basic game, there's not really anything else you can do yet, so draw a card in your turn. The next turn, again, you're going to play a card. I'm going to play Geordie LaForge here and draw a card. All right, unfortunately, I drew a ship, so turn 3, I would play my ship. And when Matt and I play like a full game, there's some other kinds of cards we can use that can help you get ships faster. It can really slow you down if you don't have a ship until later. Yeah, so we have a ship now, the USS Nebula. It requires a command star and a staffing star to get to be staffed and operational. So fortunately, Jody LaForge is a command star. Troy also the command star, which can count as a staffing star. So this ship is ready to go with these two people. So I'm going to put them on it, move to my execute orders phase of this turn 3, and let's go pretend to attempt a mission. So where do we put dilemmas? We put one here. Let's make this back to being my own mission. Like, for some reason, it won't let me rotate it. Why?
And as Steve does this, I'll just remind. Yeah. I'll leave a link to Lackey and the plugin so folks can tinker around with this themselves. I know this looks a little daunting, maybe, but I mean, also you can always play with paper. But this is just easy way to show.
And I think when Matt and I play a full game of this, we'll have a couple of like starter deck lists built using relatively inexpensive, accessible cards. We can share those as well. All right, let's just go to this mission and attempt it. So this was originally was a mission that I seeded. I just flipped it to make it look like it was my opponent's. So I flew the ship here. This mission's range is 3. Span is 3. Our ship's range is 8, bottom left corner. So 8 is greater than 3, so we can make it. And if we wanted to go even farther, we could because we have range remaining. But let's just go here. And we're going to beam to planet mission. So as I mentioned earlier, that means that you form an away team. I am going to beam down both of my personnel, LaForge and Troy. And I'm going to tell my opponent that I'm attempting the mission. So let's presume this was a dilemma that he seeded. And flip it over. And you see what happens when you're attempting this mission is you check out this dilemma. I did not know what it is because we're presuming my opponent seeded it. There's lack of preparation. Okay. And you read what it says. So this one's a little interesting. It says it's non-Borg or Borg. There are different requirements if you're playing Borg character affiliation versus every other affiliation. So we're non-Borg. Non-Borg cannot get past and lose 10 points unless you could have met mission requirements at start of the attempt. So what it wants to know is, could I have solved this mission at the beginning of the attempt? So we look at the requirements: medical, biology, and exobiology, or George LaForge and 2 medical. Well, fortunately, I have George LaForge here, but I don't have medical on either of these personnel. So under either the first set of requirements or the second set, don't have medical, so I would not have been able to solve this mission at the beginning of the attempt. So it says, cannot get past and lose 10 points. So I would suddenly lose 10 points, and this dilemma, I did not get past it, so it goes back under the mission, and I would have to face it again in the future. Now I would at least know what's there. It's the dilemma, lack of preparation, and I'd make sure that I have personnel with the right skills to get past it. But in the real game, there's probably more dilemmas under that, so you'd face increasingly difficult obstacles as you go along. I think we'll probably leave it right here because that goes through most of the basic mechanics of the game. The one note I will say is that battling is a part of this game, but it is not a very prominent part of the game. In fact, the Federation affiliation can't even initiate battles because they're pacifists, according to in the Star Trek setting. So how it works battles is basically it's a very simple mechanism. You're comparing your ship's weapons to your opponent's ship's shields, and if one is higher than the other, the opposing ship is damaged. And after it's damaged, if it's damaged the second time, it's destroyed. And then away team battles function similarly on planets. You can beam down an away team to fight your opponent's away team, and you make a stack of personnel. You flip them. You compare strength numbers. But that's probably for a more advanced video. Just to note that battles don't happen very often in this game unless you are specifically building and running a deck focused around battles, like a Klingon battle deck or like a Dominion battle deck or something like that. Matt, let me turn it back over to you. Any questions or thoughts about this from just sort of the basic rule overview?
No, I think I'm interested to kind of try this out. I think the one thing that's interesting is sort of the the seed phase and how much this is a board game-esque. I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting to see in sort of a CCG, and I think that other Decipher products, Star Wars CCG and Lord of the Rings, they sort of were on this simplicity curve, right, where they started out to be more complex, and then as Decipher kept on coming out with games, you end up with like Young Jedi and Austin Powers at the end of this slope, where just it turns out
Yeah.
like they made really, really complex games, and then they slowly got simpler over time. So I'm curious to see how this plays. I think I'm going to have a pretty big learning curve here, even after sitting here for 30 minutes. We didn't hit the goal, but it doesn't matter. So, folks, I hope you enjoyed this. This is sort of the basics of Star Trek CCG. We're going to play a game sort of over Lackey here down the road. We just got to figure out how exactly to do it. But feel free to leave comments and all the stuff. I'm sure we missed some things. This is a really, really complex game, as we said at the top. So it's hard to get it all right in under 20/30 minutes. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for walking us through this, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. See you next time.
Yep.
These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise.